Jesus said, "Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and one's foes will be members of one's own household." Eek. And trust me, the rest of the readings weren't any better. So I want to thank Tom and Chris for letting me wrestle with this one. But we'll see what we can do. And I don't want to dismiss this reading because this is telling us all here in 2026 that the early church, this is what they experienced. That for many members who decided to be followers of Jesus Christ, their lives were disrupted and upended by being followers of Jesus Christ, and they were put outside of their communities and outside of their families. So I don't want to dismiss that reality. But the good news for us in our history is that's not many of our realities. It's some, but it's not most of our realities that we are going to have and to be put outside of a community for being followers of Jesus Christ. And yet, if you had a family like mine that consisted of two uncles who were Episcopal priests of different generations, and a grandmother who was a member or associate member of the Order of St. Margaret's, which is an Episcopal order, religious order in Boston, and a grandmother whose father was a Methodist circuit rider, and a brother who followed the Grateful Dead, and it's a religion, and cousins who had various Southern Baptist, literalist, fundamentalists. Anyway, all to say is when we gathered together for Thanksgiving or those family events, oftentimes this reading felt very real because everybody, the family sport was Jesus. And how we could create a history about Jesus or make a defense about Jesus or a theology about Jesus that was right. And it pitted uncle against father. My father went to seminary, by the way. I should have added that. A father against an uncle, and a cousin against a sibling, and a mother against a daughter-in-law. And it just, so most of the time it was fun. And then the egos got a little bruised, and it got a little more serious. And sometimes it felt like at these family gatherings, a sword was being brought out and people were being divided against one another. And in some ways, this reading became real for our family. Now, I tell you this not because I expect you all to come out of families with two uncles who are clergy and a father who went to seminary and a grandmother who was an associate member of a religious order and a grandmother who was Methodist circuit rider, daughter, none of that. That just seems like extreme to me. And I'm going to have words with God when I get there because it may be explain why I'm here. But I tell you that because what happens over the years is, being 21, 22 and being steeped in theology, I thought I knew everything about Jesus and so was very willing to take the bait and go after my uncles and after a grandmother, God bless her, and whomever else. And over time, I began to realize that each of their understandings of Jesus was born out of their experience of life. And so one uncle who was a Navy chaplain in Vietnam obviously had a very different understanding of who God was and who Jesus was than an uncle who grew up in the 1970s and went to seminary in the 70s in Berkeley, California. Or a grandmother who in the 1920s was sewing altar cloths for the church in Haiti, or a grandmother who was waiting for her father to return from preaching in a number of churches here in rural Appalachia. Each of them came out of a different history, and Jesus spoke to them out of that history because Jesus meets us where we are. And when I began to realize that, these were not moments of divisions, but these were moments of growth. That if I could sit and listen to my uncles, I could learn something about Jesus that expanded my understanding through their experience and their history and their DNA and their brain chemistry. And however Jesus interacted with them, it began to make sense. What made sense to them began to make sense for me. And Jesus, who was so contained out of those theological books, started to expand. And so I found myself listening more and more and saying, Jesus is this. Yes, there are fundamentals about who Jesus is. There are fundamentals about who God is. And yet, it's more than that. Because each and every one of us, and I tell you this story because of each and every one of us. Here we are in this beautiful cathedral. And God is breathing anew and afresh in this place. And Tom invited us to look at the green a couple of weeks ago. And the trees that God created to give us shade. And the sun that warms and grows in that beautiful meadow with the flowers and the grasses. And we're reminded that God breathes through the creation and God breathes through each and every one of you and all the joys and the fears and the hopes and the dreams that you woke up with this morning and got into the cars and came here to this cathedral this morning. And God has spoken to each and every one of us and met us where we are. And we all come with different histories and different DNA or variations of DNA. We come together with different experiences. And we have different experiences and understandings of who God is and who Jesus is. And the dinner table does not have to be a place of separation. But the invitation is for the dinner table to be a place of growth. And to hear another's experience and say, not to give up your own experience, that would be disingenuous and not what God wanted. God created you and engages you for you. But God does that to your neighbor and the person sitting alongside of you and behind you, in front of you, and the dog you're holding in your lap, I guess. And God's inviting us to have and to expand our understanding. The sword doesn't have to be destructive. The sword can be a place of learning and of deepening and of expansion. And that's my prayer for you, and it's my prayer for me, that we may continue to grow to love God deeper by getting to know our uncle, our fathers, our grandmothers, and our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren, and our children, and hearing how God has met them, and allowing ourselves to have that larger picture of God. Amen.